Empowerment Through Knowledge Publishing and Serena Stone present the Tequila Drinker's Guide to Health and Wellness Radio Hour with your host, author and medical Qigong educator, Serena Stone. Featuring the director of the Universal Healing Tao and author of dozens of books on natural health and longevity, Dao Master Mantak Chia. This show is for all of us who work hard and play hard. Those of us who are willing to try new things to improve their life, and those who will not tolerate victimization as an answer to health and wellness issues. And now, the Tequila Drinker's Guide to Health and Wellness, episode number 8, Man, Boobs, and Chicken Legs, part 1, with Dr. George Yu. On today's episode, we look at hormones and their role in health and wellness. In America, more and more men are receiving testosterone therapy, and even more women are on estrogen, progesterone, or both. Dr. George Yu tells us what to look for to see if our hormones are imbalanced and how hormones affect energy and fitness.
Today's trivia is from preventionandhealing.com, medicinenet.com, and mindbodygreen.com. Fact: generations of baby boomers are facing the reality of becoming a generation of senior citizens. The last decade has been a quest for the holy grail of longevity and good health, leading to a new phenomena of anti-aging medicine and hormone replacement therapy, or HRT. Fact: one of the largest and best designed U.S. government studies has shown that estrogen did not protect women from heart disease and osteoporosis. In fact, the study showed that estrogen significantly increases the incidence of breast cancer, uterine cancer, life-threatening blood clots, and Alzheimer's disease. Fact: without adequate testosterone, a man may lose his sex drive, experience erectile dysfunction, feel depressed, have a decreased sense of well-being, and have difficulty concentrating. Listen to the show to hear about chicken legs, loss of muscles in the thighs, a pot belly, and man boobs as well. Fact: some of the most common symptoms of hormonal imbalances in women are persistent weight gain, belly fat and loss of muscle mass, low libido, fatigue, anxiety, irritability and depression, and the big one, insomnia. Fact: traditional hormone replacement therapy consists of using synthetic hormones. Synthetic means you put it out in nature, put it in the dirt, let it rain on it. They will not break down in nature. Synthetic. Today's show is about your hormones. In America, more and more men are receiving testosterone therapy, and an even larger number of female friends are on estrogen, progesterone, or both. We've all heard tales of bodybuilders injecting steroids for bigger muscles and suffering horrible side effects. Today, we get some answers about hormone therapy and its place in a Taoist lifestyle. Now you guys are going to recognize some of those sounds coming from beyond because we're here in Dell Garden in our beautiful dining hall. And we're going to be visiting with Dr. George Yu today. George Yu is a surgeon based out of Annapolis, Maryland and Washington, D.C. He's been a professor of urology at the George Washington University Medical Center since 1981 and a partner in Aegis Medical and Research Associates for 35 years. Through his surgical experience, he's learned to understand the impact of sex hormones beyond reproduction. After 35 years of performing pelvic cancer surgery and reconstructive surgery, he's dedicated the remaining part of his career to sharing with the public the importance of sex hormones beyond reproduction. Hi, Dr. Yu.
Hello. Thank you.
So I think our first question today is, because we're just going to jump right into this, how does a surgeon come to be an expert on sex hormone endocrinology?
Good questions. Many people ask me this. And when I first arrived at Johns Hopkins in 1977, I had no idea that I would ever be endeavored with sex hormones because I was only interested in doing surgery. In 1978, I was assigned to basically care and castrate about 100 men for part of a study at Johns Hopkins and some of the private patients of one of the heads over there. And what happened was, in that 1 year, I saw the castration results of 100 men because I had to answer all their calls. And what I noticed was they all became fatigued, they all gained weight, they all lost their muscles, and they had no erections, and they were depressed and very, very weak. And so I started looking at this, and by the end of the 1 year, many of them developed some kind of higher glucose level in their blood. And I realized at that time that there was something that may have been secondary to the castration. So I followed this a lot. Now, moving forward quickly, around 1999, after I left Johns Hopkins, I was involved with a lot of pelvic cancer surgery for women, including bladder cancer, in which we remove sometimes the rectum, sometimes the uterus, and the bladder in completion. So we had to reconstruct it. Now, we had to reconstruct the bladder, a new bladder, but I also reconstructed the vagina. And I really couldn't accomplish that without the use of hormones to soften the tissues and make it pliable. Once I understood that, I was using synthetic hormones and horse hormones, and it worked beautifully. But what happened was...
You can hear me. I have feelings about synthetic hormones.
And what happened was it worked beautifully such that I started getting patients from California. Now, that's a different group. They didn't want horse hormone or synthetic Provera, and they wanted to use natural hormones. Of course, I said, fine, as long as it worked, and we gave it to them 1 month before the elective surgery. It worked. And this went on for a while, and I noticed that the people were very happy, but one woman came to me right after the surgery, and she said, Dr. Yu, I'd like to have 1 year's prescription of both estradiol and progesterone. I said, why? The surgery's finished. Because she said, I could sleep for the first time in 20 years.
Oh, wow.
It dawned on me that I was focusing on the pelvis while it was affecting their brain.
Yeah.
So this went on, and I started really looking at hormones more and more. And what was very interesting was my observation in 1978. I finally worked with Dr. Tricia, Boston University, and we felt that this whole complex of events was the result of the hormones having an effect on the cell mitochondria, which is a big topic of research right now. And I realized that this was much bigger than I even expected. And therefore, I started studying it. And then I decided finally to focus all my energy on this subject.
Wow. Okay, well, let me ask you this. What are some of the signs? Let's talk to the guys first. What are some of the most common signs that the average man is hormonally imbalanced? I mean, and can it be checked?
Absolutely. So what I tell most women when I give a talk or when I see patients, look at your husband sideways. If he is developing what we call chicken legs, meaning that his thigh muscles are thinning out,
yeah,
and he's developing a little pot belly, and then if you look at him even more sideways, he's starting to have a profile of some breasts, and his shoulders, of course, are not booming like he was at age 20, but shrunken, and he's beginning to have a hunchback, Those are all the classical look of andropause. Now, we're not talking about bodybuilders. We're talking about the average guy who thinks he's just getting older. And what's happening is metabolically, it's showing that things are changing drastically. Also, my biggest clients always tell me their thinking is not good. As you know, women can multitask beautifully, but men have one great advantage. They can focus on one subject till the end of earth. So they say, honey, don't bother me. I'm thinking about one thing. And they're laughing in their brain and they're saying, I'm doing 50 things.
Right.
Okay, but this is a characteristic of testosterone affecting the brain. In fact, when I was at Johns Hopkins my first year, I met Dr. John Money, who said testosterone and estradiol estrogens affect the fetus brain before they are even delivered. So it affects the brain heavily. Okay?
Okay, and guys, stay with us because we will talk about what you can do about this. I know that a lot of you are listening to this right now thinking, I know I have those symptoms, so just stay with us. Well, there will be a beautiful conclusion to this, but I want to address women now. So what are common symptoms that a hormone imbalance may need to be checked if you're a female?
So, before I forget, the one thing you should be aware of, you should read the Women's Health Initiative study of 2002. That put an end to all hormone therapy. What? And you should read it, okay? But let me go back to that later on.
Okay.
The most important thing is that the woman is the one who bears the child in a much more complicated endocrine system. The ratio between the estrogen and progesterone tells everything. So the woman does very well at around age 20, and then little by little, she starts noticing that her mid-abdomen is starting to grow.
Right.
And she doesn't like that because every woman wants a hourglass look.
Yeah, we want a waistline. All we want is a waistline.
And then the women start developing what we call the bat wings. So they have big flaps of fat around the upper arm, and that's also fat and no longer workable and cannot get rid of it. And they start having the beginnings of sleepless problems.
Yeah.
And also a second problem is that their mood starts changing, and then their vagina gets very dry, and therefore the sexual problems start.
Oh boy.
Okay.
Oh God.
So this is a complex that goes on and on and on before even the hot flashes.
Wow. Okay, so I know that lots of women out there are listening to this, and you you have these symptoms. So again, ladies, stay with us. But Dr. Yu, I have to ask, are libido and sex drive loss hormonal issues?
Absolutely. So we know that for men, as the testosterone goes down, not only will they have less libido, but they won't maintain the erections that they're used to. Okay?
Oh, God.
Secondly, for women, if they start having atrophy of their vaginal walls, not only is that happening there, but the G-spot and the clitoris also change, just like the men. Okay? And this is related clearly to both estradiol, progesterone, and testosterone. So we have a lot of patients who come in with dry vaginal walls, and when we correct it locally, they feel much better first, and their urine leakage stops.
Oh, that's huge. Incontinence,
yes,
huge.
And that's part of it, because the genital organ of bladder and the vagina is very, very intimate. And yes, the answer is we can change that, and we can lubricate it so that the vaginal walls are healthy and is not susceptible to all kinds of problems like infections.
All right. Well, normally we only spend the first 5 minutes or so talking about problems. I'm pretty sure we've just put about 10 minutes into it, and I'm pretty sure most of the people over 30 in our audience, they're listening really clearly. I think we've told you guys out there listening what symptoms to look for, and let's face it, a lot of folks have this. Let's switch our conversation over to solutions. Actually, wait a minute. Um, there's a really weird question that you suggested, and I think we should ask it. We definitely have to get into the solutions, but how come women go through menopause and men don't?
Men do go through menopause slowly.
What?
The issue that I mentioned to you, when I performed the castration or they had a Lupron injection, they immediately lost their testosterone levels, and they go through the same hot flash as a woman does as the beginning of the pituitary axis response to the gonadal tissues not producing enough hormones to keep the body happy.
Okay, we better start talking about solutions here. Or actually, do you really think menopause, or what is the gentleman's issue called?
Andropause.
Andropause. Okay, guys, you're there with us now. What do we do?
Well, what you can do for both men and women is, number one, to be aware. And I recommend two great books. One is What Doctors May Not Tell You About Menopause by John Lee, one of my great teachers and respected professionals. The other one is to look up zrt.com, where Dr. David Zava was a colleague of John Lee, and they were the biggest proponents of looking at this in the United States, but it actually started in England with Catherine Dalton looking at the effects of progesterone. So the first thing you want to do is get your biological endocrine hormone age. You read the books and you begin to understand it. And later on, you will see people who are experts in hormone endocrinology, specializing in sex hormone, and specializing use of natural human identical hormones. You hear about bioidentical
Yeah, all the
hormones,
time, actually.
but it's actually what you want. The more specific term is human identical hormones.
Wait a minute. What's the difference?
I told you the Women's Health Initiative study of 2002 was one of the greatest studies done in the United States, comprising about 16,000 women. They used Premarin, horse hormone, CEE, equine conjugated estrogens, and a synthetic progesterone called Provera medroxyprogesterone. And they thought that the outcome would be very good, but after 5 years out of the 8, there were too many complications clearly evident, both breast cancer, cardiovascular problems, and
God.
most importantly, over 100% venous clots.
Blood clots?
Blood clots in the veins, okay? And this is still being used right now as part of the birth control pills in smaller doses. Okay, so this is not new, but this brought an end to synthetic hormones. However, most of us, including myself, thought that synthetic hormones and natural hormones were all the same. No, they're not the same, and very well known through history. And the liver recognizes that and causes some big-time problems, as you will see.
Okay, well, okay, so we know what we don't want to do, but what is this more natural hormone therapy that you're talking about then?
This is not new. It started with the advent of the great piece of work by Catherine Dalton in England, and then it continued on. But natural hormones are generally derived from yam, and in 1940, Dr. Russell Marker of Penn State University discovered that yam molecule can be converted to progesterone. And that started the whole industry of developing steroid hormones as medications, including prednisone and birth control pills. But these natural hormones cannot be patented because they are part of nature. And people like myself, after learning from the patients that the natural hormones seem to work better, And interestingly enough, some of the data done on sex changes in the Netherlands clearly showed that using synthetic estrogen as opposed to natural estradiol estrogen was much better without complications. So I started studying this, and the natural hormones are exactly the same as your body. This has been going on at least 50,000 years. So you can't tell me that this is bad for you. But the key point is the proper proportion of progesterone to estrogen and the proper proportion of testosterone and estradiol is important to keep everything well. The bodybuilders are not my subject, although they did a lot of good work that I used to understand, but they were using overdoses and synthetic hormones just for the show, and that caused a lot of problems.
A lot of problems, like death later, that weakened the heart. It was absolutely a disaster. So what I'm hearing then, and I think our listeners are probably have their ear glued to their radio or computer, and what I'm hearing is that there is a way to attain these balanced hormones so we can avoid some of the horrible symptoms we were talking about earlier, and it doesn't have to be through synthetic hormones, which is what, or the bioidenticals, which apparently aren't as identical as we hoped they were.
Well, generally, this term came about, and it's a reasonable term, but the more I talk to people, the more, if you say human identical, it just makes it easier for everybody to understand it.
All right, for our people who are fans of Master Chia and are learning about Dao practices, you're here in Dao Garden. I see you and Master Chia chatting an awful lot. He's really excited about your research and your work. How can Dao practice and meditation enhance health and endocrine functions from where you stand right now?
Well, number one, I do have some biases. I am Chinese by origin, and my parents, of course, practiced Qi Gong, and this is energy medicine. But I never really knew much about internal Qigong. But I've read about it, and I felt that many different forms of therapy are necessary to solve a problem. And if there's prevention, why not? And just to give tribute to a 7,000-year-old practice in which the Dao practice, or Tao practice, says is that the most important organ is not your heart or your brain, but your genital organs, because it could reproduce another human being. Oh. And the whole point is to use that energy to revitalize the rest of your body as you age. So how did I get really impressed? Because I saw a few women who were able to decrease their menstruations so that they don't have these monthly bleeding, anemia, and sloughing of all this tissue. Now, if you're going to...
You happen to be sitting next to one, by the way.
So, this is very hard on the patients. The women suffer a lot, and you get 400 shots of this in your lifetime, and then it's over, and then you're old.
You mean our eggs? We have 400 opportunities to make a baby, you mean?
You have 2 million eggs, but you have 400 menstruations.
Ah, got it.
And that's it. That's the end. And therefore, the hormones start declining. So what I said was, if you can really achieve that and prove that to me, I would be impressed. And so what I did was interview a lot of French people who practice it a lot, and a lot of people who told me firsthand that yes, they were able to decrease the menstruations, and they felt much better, and some were able to stop it completely, but rarely. I saw people who stopped it, and then when they went back to their life of busy work, an airline stewardess, she said she couldn't quite manage it. But the important thing is that there is physiology confirmation that if the nipples, when a baby is sucking the nipple, it causes oxytocin production, which depresses the estrogen and progesterone.
Ding, ding,
So
ding, ding,
we
ding.
know this already. So we said, so the Dao, that Mantak Chia was able to bring to the world is that his great management skills, his great speaking skills, and his charisma to let the world know that this practice, this practical practice applies. There are many Tao practitioners, but they can't manage things like he can. So I was impressed by his management skills and his speaking skills and his emphasis on the fact that energy from the genital system by exercises can replenish part of your life.
Yes, sir.
So I was an expert in sex hormone endocrinology, and we talked many times, and we said, well, what happens in the long run? Well, everybody dies. So sooner or later, even the Dao practitioners will get old. I said, why not combine the two, and let's see whether we can make it better with the two combination in synergy.
All right, so this interview is so fascinating that, and we're going to talk more about success stories. We're going to do a part 2, for sure. We're going to do a part 2. So listeners, come back in a couple of weeks, and you're going to hear Dr. Yu talk about some success stories. Maybe we can go into a little bit more specifics on different therapies, how this would work. Do you start with a blood test, things like that. For now, I think our people are going to want to know how they can learn more about this. Folks, I can tell you right now that Master Chia is pretty dedicated to bringing this natural hormone therapy information and awareness to the public. I don't know what it's going to look like, but you can check his website, I would say, within the next couple of months, and we'll see where we went with it. But for now, where do people go to learn more about this? You know that so many of our listeners have these symptoms.
So, I told you about the books, and I told you in our website, we're always revising it because so many people need it. It's called totallyyu.com. And in there, I try to explain to people how I developed an understanding of this. And I'm certainly not the first one. I'm not the pioneer. I'm just a facilitator.
Oh.
And my thinking is that people need to understand this because it's your body and you're the one, not the doctor. You're the one who's suffering from this. And we need to give information to the public, not only to professionals, but to the public. And you can look up the website totallyyu.com for just some basic information. But in there will be references and professional articles that explain to you what this is about so that you would be empowered to further investigate this, to maintain your health, and to feel right.
All right, folks, you heard it here, www.totallyyu.com. Dr. Yu, thank you so much, and we'll be back again in a couple of weeks with some really fascinating stories. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for the interview.
Bye, guys.
Thank you for joining us on another Empowerment Through Knowledge adventure. Want to learn more? Find Master Chia at mantakchia.com. That's mantakchia.com. Find advanced learning materials, books, and more at serenastone.com. That's SarinasTone.com. Thanks for listening, and if you like what you heard, please subscribe today. This podcast was produced by J.C. Warfield Productions in conjunction with the Echo Chamber Studio, Minneapolis, Minnesota.